In Scotland, whiskey is not a drink, it is a religion, governed by a holy trinity of ingredients: barley, water, and thyme. Especially thyme. The slow, patient, multi-decade slumber in an oak cask is the ultimate, non-negotiable sacrament. But Finn McCallum, a young master distiller from the windswept Isle of Islay, was a heretic. He possessed a palate so sensitive he could taste not just the age of a whiskey, but the story of its barrel, the memory of the weather during its maturation. And his gift told him a profound, dangerous truth: that time, the industry's unshakable god, was a variable, and he believed he could bend it to his will.
In a small, stone-walled workshop, hidden from the dogmatic eyes of the old guard, he worked on his blasphemy. It wasn't magic. It was a deep, intuitive understanding of chemistry and physics. Using a combination of ultrasonic waves to simulate decades of molecular vibration and pressurized oxygen-controlled casks to accelerate the wood's influence, he was not just aging the spirit, he was composing it. He was precisely replicating the exact ester formations and phenolic compounds that would normally take half a century to develop. He was creating a 3-year-old whiskey that possessed the deep, complex, impossible soul of a 50-year-old masterwork.
He called his creation Aethelred, a name from ancient kings. He knew he needed the blessing of the industry's guardians, the powerful, deeply conservative Scotch Whisky Association. He arranged a blind tasting for their Council of Elders, a group of stern, silver-haired men who were the high priests of tradition. He poured his 3-year-old creation alongside a legendary, priceless 50-year-old single malt. The elders swirled, nosed, and tasted. A look of profound, shocked disbelief spread across their faces. They could not deny the quality. It was, by all accounts, perfect. One of them looked at Finn, his eyes narrowed not with admiration, but with deep, fearful suspicion. "What is this sorcery?" he demanded.
When Finn explained his methods, their awe turned to outrage. It was not a miracle, it was a violation. They saw his science not as innovation, but as a technological counterfeit, a high-tech forgery that threatened the very foundation of their multi-billion-dollar industry. An industry built on the simple, powerful magic of time. The association didn't just reject his whiskey, they declared war on it. They issued a formal decree, branding his methods as unnatural and deceptive. They threatened to sue him into oblivion if he ever dared to label his creation Scotch whiskey, effectively making him a pariah, an outcast with barrels of a spirit that legally had no name. The association's decree was a death sentence. Distributors canceled their orders, investors vanished. The small local community on Islay, whose economy depended on the reputation of its traditional distilleries, began to see Finn not as a native son, but as a dangerous radical who threatened their way of life. He was alone, with an aging inventory of a spirit he couldn't legally define and a mountain of debt. He would sit for hours in his silent warehouse, the air thick with the beautiful, complex aroma of his illegal creation, a king of a kingdom of ghosts.
But in the depths of his despair, a new strategy was forged. If the old world refused to recognize him, he would bypass it entirely. He would take his case to the one court that could not be swayed by tradition or politics: the anonymous, impartial palates of the world's greatest connoisseurs. His target became the Golden Dram, the most prestigious and fiercely competitive spirits competition in the world. It was held once a year in London, and its final judging was conducted under a strict triple-blind protocol. The judges never knew the brand, the age, or the origin of what they were tasting. They knew only the spirit itself. Submitting his entry was an act of high-stakes deception. In the country of origin field, he wrote undisclosed. In the age statement field, he wrote non-applicable. And for the spirit type, He used a single defiant word: postmodern. He knew the entry would likely be rejected by the preliminary screeners, so he included a single handwritten note with the sample bottle. The note did not contain a plea or an explanation. It contained only a short, cryptic quote from a famous philosopher. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident.
The head of the Golden Dram's screening committee, a notoriously fussy and pedantic traditionalist, was about to discard Finn's bizarre entry, but the handwritten note intrigued him. Annoyed but curious, he opened the sample. He poured a small measure. He smelled it. His professional, bored expression vanished. He tasted it. He froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. He had never tasted anything like it. It had the complexity of an ancient spirit, but the vibrancy of a young one. He did not know what it was, but he knew it was undeniable genius. Against his better judgment, against all protocol, he personally approved the anonymous entry for the final round. The Trojan horse was inside the city walls. The final judging of the Golden Dram took place in a silent, white, almost surgically clean tasting room. The 5 judges were the gods of the spirits world: a legendary master blender from Japan, a brutally honest French wine critic, a celebrated American bourbon historian, a wealthy connoisseur and collector, and, in a twist of cruel irony, the head of the Scotch Whisky Association, the very man who had publicly condemned Finn. They sat at a long table, separated by partitions. Before them, a line of numbered identical glasses containing the finalists. They had no information, only their palates. Finn was not in London. He was back in his distillery on Islay, watching a pirated, secret live stream of the judges' faces fed to him by a sympathetic insider. He and his small community of believers, the local publican, a few old fishermen, were gathered around a small monitor. They watched as the judges tasted their way through the finalists, their faces impassive, professional. Then they reached glass number 7, Finn's whiskey. He watched his arch-nemesis, the head of the association, lift the glass. A subtle change came over the judges' faces as they tasted number 7. The Japanese master blender paused, a look of deep, meditative inquiry on his face. The French critic's eyebrow raised in surprise. The American historian began scribbling furious, excited notes. But the most telling reaction came from the head of the Scotch Whisky Association. He tasted it once, he tasted it again. He put the glass down, a look of profound, horrified recognition on his face. He knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. He was tasting the ghost he had tried to exorcise. The scores were submitted electronically, in secret. The judges left the room, their faces unreadable. The wait was agonizing. Back on Islay, the mood was thick with tension. Then the live feed from the awards ceremony began. The host walked to the stage to announce the winner of the highest honor, the Spirit of the Year. He opened the golden envelope. For the first time in the history of the Golden Dram, the host announced, his voice filled with genuine shock, the judges have awarded a perfect score, 100 points out of 100. He paused for dramatic effect. The winner is entry number 7, from an undisclosed location, a spirit known only as postmodern. The announcement of a perfect score for an anonymous postmodern spirit sent the industry into a frenzy. It was the biggest mystery in decades. Who was this phantom distiller?
what was this impossible liquid? The head of the Scotch Whisky Association, humiliated and cornered, had no choice. At the post-ceremony press conference, a journalist asked him directly about the winner. Cornered by the blind verdict of his own peers, he was forced to admit the truth. "While its methods are unorthodox," he said, his voice stiff with defeat, "the quality, as judged today, is undeniable." It was a forced surrender, a public admission that his dogma had been defeated by pure, irrefutable taste.
With his enemy publicly humbled, Finn revealed his identity. The story was a global sensation, the young Scottish rebel, the David who had defeated the Goliath of tradition with science and a philosophical quote. His distillery on Islay became a pilgrimage site. Offers poured in from massive conglomerates, offering him blank checks to buy his technology, his brand, his soul. They wanted to mass-produce his miracle, to turn his art into a commodity. But Finn had not fought this war just to become a richer version of the men he had defeated. He refused every offer. Instead, he announced his own radical business model. He would never mass-produce his whiskey. He would release only a single, small batch each year, each one unique. And it would not be sold in stores. To acquire a bottle, you had to enter a lottery. But the lottery was not for money. To enter, you had to submit a short written answer to a single philosophical question that changed each year. Questions like, what memory would you pair with the taste of a winter storm? Or, describe a moment of perfect silence. He was not selling a drink. He was building a community of thinkers, of poets, of connoisseurs of feeling. His unbrand became the most exclusive and sought-after spirit in the world. A bottle of Atherred on your shelf was not a symbol of wealth, but a symbol of taste and intellectual depth. He had created a new definition of luxury. But his greatest impact was on the industry he had challenged. Forced to compete with his undeniable quality, the old stagnant distilleries began to innovate. They started experimenting, taking risks, focusing once again on the art, not just the age statement. He had not destroyed the temple of tradition. He had simply opened its windows and let in the fresh air. Years later, Finn was no longer the young rebel. He had become the wise man of the Isles, a quiet oracle sought out by a new generation of artisans, not just distillers, but cheesemakers, weavers, and chefs. He never taught them his techniques. He taught them his philosophy. He taught them that the most valuable ingredient is not time, but intention. That the story behind a product is more important than the product itself. And that the bravest act in a world of commodities is to create something that is unapologetically, stubbornly, and beautifully singular. And what of his old adversary, the head of the association? He was forced into a quiet retirement, but in a final, unexpected act, he anonymously submitted his own story to Finn's lottery. He wrote not of storms or silence, but of a quiet, profound regret. He wrote of a man who had spent his life protecting a beautiful, ancient book of rules, only to realize too late that he had forgotten how to read the poetry within it. He did not win the lottery, but he received a small, unmarked package in the mail a few weeks later. Inside was a single, small sample vial of Finn's whiskey and a handwritten note with only 2 words: I understand. Finn McCallum's story became a legend, a parable for the modern age. He proved that true value is not a consensus decided by a committee, but a connection felt by an individual. He challenged the tyranny of the clock, reminding us that the depth of an experience is not measured by its duration, but by its intensity and its truth. He was the distiller who created an impossible spirit, but his true masterpiece was a business that ran not on supply and demand, but on story and soul.
He taught us that the most rebellious act is not to destroy the past, but to fulfill its forgotten promise. To look at the old rules not as a cage, but as a foundation upon which to build something the original architects could only have dreamed of. He was the heretic who became a true believer, the modernist who saved a classic, the man who bent time itself to prove a simple, timeless point. The spirit, in the end, is all that matters.